You know what feels so good in the moment? Talking shit. Gossip tastes so sweet, but it's so bad for you. And it's a cancer on your company's culture. Starting in week 1, we teach the team declaring exercise, a tool for having tough conversations with each other. And the result is a company where gossip isn't allowed. My co-host Shaun turned me on to the clearing exercise years ago, and my long-term friend and co-founder Ben started using it right away. And it profoundly changed how we communicated and managed conflict. We've since implemented it at goodr, along with other tools for giving feedback, having tough conversations, and overall improving communication. Let's talk about it.
This is Culture Goodr with Stephen and Shaun with a special PSA to remind you that anytime someone says Bosley or Bosley's Basset Hound Dreams, you must say, long live the king. Thank you.
So it's pretty bold to say that we're a company with no gossip, but we've done a lot to shift things more toward direct conversation rather than back channel. What are some of the keys to that shift?
Well, actually, we strive to have no gossip. In full transparency, gossip still exists, but it's not tolerated. But when gossip comes up and somebody wants to vent, and just to be clear, everybody, venting is another word for gossip, so don't confuse it. But somebody will say something like, that sounds important to you, Shauna. You should definitely speak with that person about that. That little shift just in general is huge. We can go in the clearing exercise, but really just putting it out there as a goal and holding ourselves accountable is a huge part of it.
Yeah, that fits right in with the idea that what gets measured gets improved. And so we're kind of saying, all right, this is a thing that we want to reduce. So we're going to put our attention on it. And we have that cue. Talk to people, not about them. And listening to what people say as a way of reminding them that that's the thing that they should share with someone else.
Yeah, if you don't verbalize it and set it as a goal, how does it change? And it's in our behaviors. You know, we have slippery and supporting behaviors that speak to gossiping.
Right, exactly. So we created the clearing exercise, or we brought the clearing exercise in as a shared strategy to help us communicate tough issues. Can you talk a little bit about the format of that?
Yeah, the clearing exercise is a game changer for everyone out there. And we'll obviously put this in the show notes, but there's 4 parts of clearing. And this is really for, tough conversations, if there's conflict, how they should be handled. We teach people this from the beginning, and it's 4 parts. It's number 1 is facts. So you state the facts. Number 2 is your thoughts and feelings. So how these things made you feel, the thoughts that arose. Number 3 is your role in it. So owning your part. And number 4 is what you'd like to see moving forward. How this kind of would work practically is Shaun brought this to Ben and I years ago. I'd asked him about how him and a partner he had at another company, what their weekly meeting format was like. And he brought this in. He's like, this thing was a game changer. Normally, like a conflict would happen, something like this. Ben, who is one of my co-founders, we've known each other since high school. If you have conflict, you might let something build up, get annoyed, and, starts with something. And then, the fight's never about the fight. The fight's about 3 things before the fight. And so it'd be like, you haven't been working hard and, you've been kind of an asshole lately. Like, do you even care about this company? That type of stuff manifests. But really, if you're catching things in the moment and you're using the clearing exercise, that comment that would lead to a fight should go something like this. Hey, showed to that meeting last Thursday. That's a universal fact. It's undeniable. My thoughts and feelings are, it really hurt me because I've been working my ass off on this project and it's really important to me. And it just felt like you've devalued everything I'm doing. So that's mine. Like, those are my thoughts and my feelings without labeling Ben as an asshole. It's how I feel. And then third is my role. My role in this is I've never communicated it to you, how important this is to me and the brand. And I really need your support here. And moving forward, number 4, I'd like you to be mindful of how important this is to me and notify me if you're going to miss a meeting. And then Ben would repeat it back to me and say, are you clear? If we wanted to do this like in real time without the explaining, do you think that's worth it, Shaun?
We can give it a shot.
So if this has been Shaun and this happened, I'd be like, hey, Shaun, I need something to clear with you. And at goodr, this is a setup thing and people can just say that. It's not a scary thing. I'd be like, the facts are, showed at that meeting last Thursday. My thoughts are, it really hurt because I've been working my ass off on this project and it's really important to me and it really devalued all the work I've been putting in. It made me feel like you didn't care. And my role in this is I've never communicated to you how important this is to me and how I need your support. And moving forward, I'd like for you to just be mindful of this and notify me if you're going to miss a meeting.
All right. So what I heard, Stephen, is that when showed to that meeting last Thursday, it made you feel like you've been working your ass off and me not showing up made it devalue the contribution that you were making. And your role in this is not communicating that sooner to me And in the future, if I'm going to miss a meeting, you'd prefer if I could tell you that in advance. Did I miss anything?
Just making sure that you're just mindful of how important this is to me.
All right. So I'll definitely keep it in mind because I'd never want you to feel diminished or that I don't believe that your work is important or the things that you're focusing on are important. Phil, are we clear at this point?
We're clear.
Okay, great.
And then you move on and like, you don't need to discuss it. You don't need to go down this path of, oh, I'm sorry, blah, 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 blah. It's really just to get things out. And it really changes how you interact. And once Ben and I started doing it basically one a week for a month, because you realize like things have stacked up that you haven't cleared.
Right. I've been holding on to some stuff.
Yeah. And then, we do one every couple months. And I don't think we've cleared anything in well over a year because it leads to just better, clear communication consistently. And that's the key to this clearing. It's kind of training wheels where when you get really good at it, you actually can stop using it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing that's really cool about it is the point is not to agree even. It's just for you to be heard and understood so that you know that I heard you. And I tried to use your language as much as possible. Don't want to rephrase, but the longer the clearing is, the harder it is to remember all the parts. And if we had actually had that challenge, I would have been way more personally bought in, right? Like, oh my God, I remember that. I'm sorry. I know this feeling. Yeah. So it's harder to kind of like fake our way through it. But the whole purpose isn't to win an argument. It's simply to share in a way that you will be heard rather than holding back because you don't want to get into that back and forth debate of people defending themselves, right?
For sure. And if you follow the format, it's impossible to have an argument because I'm expressing to you and you are just repeating back and then you're done. And I really encourage people to keep that in mind. Usually when it happens is when people are saying like, I feel statements, there's a sense of like, oh, I'm really sorry. That was never my intention. And it usually at that point, when you're saying facts and you're just talking about your own feelings, people get it. It hits hard.
Right. Yeah. The key is actually having that foundation of facts, right? That's the hardest part to actually get to build the rest of the thing from.
Yep.
Yeah.
The hardest.
Yep, for sure. So clearing's a shared strategy that we use to communicate challenging issues in a skillful way with each other. And again, the goal, moving from indirect to direct communication, talking to people, not about them. What was it like to roll this out at first?
Clunky as fuck. And when everybody goes through an onboarding, and so there's always a moment of awkwardness. And when I first learned it was the same. And so Ben and I started using it first, and then we realized how great it was and rolled it out to the team. And at that point, we were a pretty small team. I mean, I don't know, 15 people maybe. And Shaun was in town, and this is before you even like worked here. You were just consulting with us.
Right.
And had the leadership team and kind of rolled this out as a concept. And Shaun explained it. I'll tell a story. There was an incident that happened a couple months prior. And I was like, hey, why don't we put this incident through the clearing exercise and see like what would have happened?
Right.
To tee up the story, we name our sunglasses crazy names, and we were doing a Vegas line, and the team chose a name, Poker, I don't even know her. Chose the name, end of day Friday, walking out the door, and Nicole, who was leading like the names at that time, was like, hey, so-and-so doesn't think we should use that name because it promotes rape culture. And it's like end of day Friday. One, I'm not even hearing it because I'm burned out. I'm like, what? What is, okay. It's compounding things of, I'm like, well, women named this, blah, 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 blah. And we spent time debating it and like fighting over it and ended up changing it. So months later, I'm like, let's do this because I think it was just a very real thing that there was actually like really different sides of it at the company. It was a perfect example. And so I said, hey, person X, let's do this. And she goes, facts. Poker, I don't know her, promotes rape culture. And the only time in a clearing exercise you actually can stop somebody is if you disagree with a fact. And that's why facts have to be universal. And I'm like, I don't think that's a fact. I think that's an opinion. And then people like different sides, like, no, that's a fact. Yes, it is, blah, blah, blah. And Ben, who's super analytical and a lawyer, goes, as someone who deals exclusively in facts, that's not a fact. The only fact here is we named a pair of goodrs, Poker, I don't even know her. And what's so important about that as a switch is how in that, like, that's a fact. All right. Yes, we all can agree with that. And so then she restarted, and it was something like, this is a super paraphrase, but hey, facts are we named a pair of goodrs, Poker, I don't even know her. My thoughts and feelings are, to me, this promotes rape culture. We're in the middle of this Me Too movement. goodr is a place that really empowers women, and this just feels really, really tone deaf. My role in this is I'm super sensitive to these things, and I want us to be progressive as a company. And moving forward, I would like this name to be changed, but more importantly, I would like names to just be posted so that people can comment on them. And so we kind of got to that point, and we'll never know because it didn't happen this way. But my gut reaction was, if that's how it would have happened, instead of, hey, Stephen, that name promotes rape culture, right, I would have said like, cool, totally get it. You have till end of day Monday to get me 3 names. Shaun, you could probably talk about the shift that happened in that room of facts versus feelings.
Totally, man. Like you said, I was consulting at the time, right? So it's like, all right, I'm bringing this into this leadership team. I hope this goes well. I want this meeting to be good. And the experience of hearing everyone and feeling the tension rise when it was like, oh, no, that is a fact. And then how can you separate that? The conclusion is built into the fact itself. It's like we started calling them like fact opinions or something.
Yeah.
And then when Ben was saying, well, here's the fact that I see. And then actually when she restated it to say, the Me Too movement is the thing, you're like, oh, that's 2 facts right there. We named the glasses this and the Me Too movement is the thing.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We are, because that is actual fact. We're in the middle of the Me Too movement.
Right. Exactly. So at all of the points where we had a conflict on what the facts were, which are objective to reality, there was a ton of tension. But as soon as we were able to separate out the facts from the feelings, you could feel the tension just go right out of the room. And I was like, oh, yes. Okay. I can own my feelings and my experience that I take from these facts, but I also can recognize that not everyone makes that same conclusion that I do. And man,
for sure.
Yeah, that shift was huge.
Yeah. And in this is the thing of, because saying poker out of nowhere promotes rape culture is saying if you like that name or you approve that name, you promote rape culture. Mm-hmm. That is what that's saying. That's a slippery slope. It's like when we say, oh, well, Trump supporters are all racist. Like, no, that's not a fact. That is factually inaccurate. I know you may feel that way because this happens, but that's a feeling.
Right.
And I think really being careful because you push people, they bristle when you just make general statements like that.
Right. And what you just pointed out, the way you broke that down, Stephen, is actually kind of perfect, right? Like you were reacting to that accusation that, oh, if I support this name, then I also support rape culture, which was totally unstated. So yeah, without pulling this apart like this and saying, all right, let's look at the facts and then build our own personal take on top of that, you'd never be able to look at the issue cleanly and clearly. You'd always be reacting to that thing that was unstated and unconscious in your own mind.
Yeah.
It's really tricky to get around that, but I feel like the clearing exercise does a pretty good job of teasing those things out.
For sure. And, I've been doing it for a long time and I still fuck it up.
Well, there's no bar for perfection other than done is better than perfect, right?
Exactly.
So do you see it as a bad thing when someone wants to clear something with you?
Oh, no, I love it. It's my favorite. A woman on our team cleared something with me the other day, and I kind of want to create a pin. Like Disneyland has like pins. So we have these pins. We have 10 of them. And if you express gratitude, you like spin this wheel and you get them. It's like pin collection. You cannot get them unless you do it. And I kind of want to create a pin, like pin that you get if you clear something with the CEO.
Right. You can only get from that.
You can only get it if you clear something or give me critical feedback.
Oh my God. Yeah. You should definitely make that a thing.
Oh yeah.
So what do you feel like the overall shift, going back to before we rolled out the clearing exercise to after, was there anything noticeable about that?
Better harmony, less fights. What's funny about it is I was talking to this woman, Crafty, on our team, who's a flock leader of the customer service department. She was telling me about clearings in her team and how well it's going. And this is like, I don't even know about, right? I don't even see. And so the fact that this is going on pretty consistently, that I don't even hear about it, is a really, really good thing. Because my sense is not a lot of things make it onto my plate because of this.
Right. Oh, yeah. So more challenges are being solved sooner. So only the more important things land on your plate.
Yeah, it's that whole, that sounds like you should go talk to that person about that. And the trickle down is that for me, then flock leaders, that people are spending time talking to each other and solving conflict rather than complaining, gossiping, and fights.
Right. So I could picture someone hearing this and going, yeah, that sounds good. Would you recommend other companies actually try this? And if so, what should they watch out for?
100%. It needs a top-down leadership. So if leadership has not bought in on this, you're fucked, and I'm really sorry about that. If you lead a team, though, you can do it with your team, and I think that's really important. If it's not official, you can still direct conversation this way. So I don't really clear anymore. And I say I don't clear anymore because once you do this enough, it's training wheels for tough conversation. So if I'm going into a hard conversation with a person, structure it like a clearing. If it's an email to a partner of ours that is critical, I structure it like a clearing. And I start with, hey, the facts are this happened. We agreed to this. You said this. This makes me feel this reason. My role in this is X. And moving forward, I need you to do Y. Because I think people hear this and they think it's like really mechanical. You can still do this if top-down leadership doesn't want to. But if you are leading a company, you are an entrepreneurial company, just start it and make it an initiative, teach everybody it, and understand you're going to fuck it up. Big tips are don't try to clear things. I think the sweet spot is like between 48 and like 96 hours. I'm a big believer in waiting 24 hours because you just need to let things sit. Don't wait too long. Never try and clear more than one thing at once. This happens a lot. I think when people first start and they'll try and clear 9 things. And first of all, a poor person you're clearing with, like having them keep track of that much stuff is brutal. And keep it simple.
Yeah.
Watch out for the hardest thing is people confusing facts for feelings.
Absolutely. The other thing that we sussed out when we were rolling it out is that taking ownership of your feelings is really important. So rather than saying, you made me feel this way, which is an accusation, just owning your feeling and saying, I felt this way.
Yeah.
This happened and I felt this.
For sure.
Rather than looping in that other person.
Oh, for sure. And also, I have many a times wanted to clear something with someone and started to type out the clearing and there not be one fact. And then me having to step back and be like, oh, no, this is on me. Fuck. right. This
so
is
you
me.
just process yourself.
Yeah. It's a really good way to process feeling. I mean, even with a partner, anyone, it's a really wonderful way to process what the real issue is.
For sure. So outside of the experience where you're talking about someone and the person you're speaking to says, hey, that sounds like that's important to you. Maybe you should go share that with them. How do you know when you need to have a tough conversation with someone?
For sure. I think a clearing is really, really good, especially if there's no next actions. If it's like, hey, I just need somebody to know how I felt. And so I think that's a really just important thing. And I think the easy sign, there's probably psychology to back this up, is if you replay a conversation more than 3 times in your head, you better fucking clear it.
Right. If you're coming up with a comeback and all that.
Yeah. Stop the loop, actually type out a clearing and schedule it. But yeah, so tough conversation, especially at goodr, is we have values and behaviors and we have multiple of them. When somebody is in a direct violation of a stated behavior, that's a tough conversation. That is a tough conversation.
Yeah. So you've spoken about the evolution from clearing to a tough conversation or using clearing as training wheels. But how do you decide at this point if you were like, all right, I think I need to clear this versus just have a tough conversation with someone?
Yeah, for sure. I don't have a clean answer. I think clearing's really good. I think the reason we teach it, we try and run goodr pretty like flat and egalitarian. But it's really good though when somebody's kind of like, I don't know, perceived above you, right, in the company, because then you can express feelings and not any next action. So I think that's a really good thing. A tough conversation, especially in the context of goodr, is when something needs to be changed. Anybody can slip up here and there, and I think it's really important not to jump down people's throat, but if you replay the conversation, it has to happen. You got it. Like, that's not a choice. But then other things, if it's a consistent issue, you got to nip it immediately.
Right. It's crazy how often just going through the process of clearing and knowing that the other person's heard you actually solves a lot of the problem, or at least relieves most of the tension in a situation like that.
Yeah, knowing, for example, on a personal level, how many fights happen because you say you're going to leave at 5 and your partner is getting in the shower at 4:55. So imagine if you have a clearing and you state this and you're like, hey, this makes me feel like you devalue me. You don't care about my feelings. X, Y, and Z. Moving forward, like, I need you to agree by the time. And if I was to do like that, for example, I'd be like, hey, the facts are last Tuesday, we were supposed to leave for dinner at 5. That's what we agreed upon. And you got in the shower at 4:55. We didn't end up leaving till 5:15. That's a fact. Feelings are, you don't care about my time. It devalues me as a person. It just comes across as really selfish to me, and it hurts, and I'm sitting there angry and don't enjoy dinner because of it. My role in this is I've never actually had this clear conversation with you, expressing the importance of this to me. And moving forward, I like you to be mindful of this and stick by our agreements. And if you need to change it, you need to notify me as soon as possible and not just assume. If you do that to a partner, my sense is they would shift immediately. And if they don't, maybe they're the wrong partner.
Right. And at the worst, you're communicating your expectations, which makes it more likely that they will be met.
Yeah.
So at this point, what is the most difficult part about having a tough conversation?
Well, thinking it's going to go right.
What does right mean to you?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Reduce your expectations. So I think just expectations. But I think the hardest thing is the preparation. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And if you're not preparing for hard conversations, you're going to fuck them up. You're going to fuck them up. And I think people don't understand that. If I need to have a hard conversation with somebody and give them some critical feedback, I'm preparing for at least an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm scripting it out so it goes as well as it can.
Right. That's one of the things that when we teach this during onboarding, we say that when someone wants to clear with you, that's a way of them showing you respect because they've taken the time to clarify what the facts, feelings, role, and change they want to see are in this issue. And they're presenting that to you, right? It's not a haphazard, hey, I'm just going to throw this at you and hope you don't get defensive. This is really important to me. And I've taken the time to clarify it in a way that you can hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you do all the steps right, facts so you're not making them bristle, owning your feelings in it, owning your role in it, of how you got there, and setting clear expectations moving forward, that's the key. And I think the one thing moving outside of the clearing exercise when you're giving feedback, setting expectations is really important. And in setting expectations, like, I need you to do this by this time, and if it doesn't happen, this is going to happen. And people don't like that, but that's the reality. If there's no consequences, and there's nothing wrong with stating that, it's an okay thing.
Right. Using clearing as basically the training wheels for feedback and for tough conversations, we can kind of shift a little bit toward where we've evolved, which is at this point, you could tee something up on your own as a clearing and then bring it as a feedback conversation where rather than just going into the meeting and saying, hey, I got some feedback for you, we can use some of Brene Brown's permission slips and container building to open the conversation by saying, I'm going to give you some feedback in this conversation. This is a super vulnerable thing for me to do and for you to hear. And I just want to call that out up front. So we do our best to actually set that stage rather than just charging in like a bull in a china shop and hoping that it goes well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one, I think setting up feedback sessions are good. And also remembering feedback should be good too. Mm-hmm. If when you start increasing to black belt level, you are giving clear and consistent positive feedback more than critical. So that when you need to give critical feedback, it's heard. And it's not just well, you only come here when things are going wrong. And so your ability with the right people to set up structures for giving consistent positive feedback, creating that space is really important. So feedback always isn't negative. Mm-hmm. Like you said, like creating that container. But when it's time to give critical feedback, it's all right. I mean, my move there is put people at ease. Like you said, hey, here's why we're here. No one's in trouble. We want to talk about Project X. At goodr, one thing that I always encourage people to give feedback that I always do is say, hey, at goodr, we value giving and receiving feedback. And this can be awkward both ways. This right now is about giving feedback. It's not a conversation. I have a few things. And be direct and to the point about it. Saying we value it, it's about feedback, not a conversation, stops the people who want to just talk and rationalize things because that's not what you're there for. You're there to give the feedback.
Yeah. I remember the very first job I had was at this really small software company and something had happened. My boss was like, hey, this person said this thing happened this way. And I immediately launched into this elaborate defense. I was like, hey, well, she told me this. And he just put his hand up and was like, hey, listen, it's totally normal to get defensive. That's a natural response to feedback, but you don't actually have to do that right now. I don't really care what happened. I just want to share this thing so that you can change what happens in the future. And I was like, oh my God, like that blew my mind,
Yeah, you got schooled.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Geez. Okay. All right. And it totally shifted my frame of mind from I am thinking of all the things that are wrong with what I'm hearing and how I need to explain my position to I don't have to do that at all. Great. So now I can listen to what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you telling me that story, and it's really, really important to tee it up the right way. I'll have a bullet pointed list that I have no trouble. I don't need to be on stage performing memorized. It's a hard thing. So if you're doing it, you're going to fuck it up and it's going to be clunky. And as you're typing it out, you're going to have in your mind, I'm going to hit him with this. And then you get in front of them and you look them in the eyes and you realize you're not as tough as you thought you were. And people aren't good at receiving feedback at first. So that is real. And the ability to set that up of like, hey, we value giving and receiving feedback. This is not a conversation. So the first time you're giving person X feedback and they roll their eyes or bristle, you hit them with the, hey, that's a really poor way to receive feedback. And that will knock anyone down a peg.
Yeah.
And I could have used early in my career been knocked down a peg because it's a real thing. And so teeing it up the right way, it's really important. It will help you in the long run.
For sure. So for most of us, it's difficult to receive feedback. How do you keep your ego in check when someone's sharing something with you?
Yeah, there's this kind of belief in mastery. If you want to be great at something, you better seek out and be open to feedback, right? The best athletes in the world have multiple coaches, right? I mean, like, think about that. If Venus and Serena Williams have coaches for tennis, you can have coaches for everything in your life, right? And so one, just keeping that in mind of like, hey, this is for improvement. If you seek it out often enough, you're not jarred by it. And I think the thing to always remember, I will also get feedback that especially will happen in the world, like, hey, goodr should do this. So always remember, you also don't have to take it. So those things, seek it out so you normalize it. Remember, it's for you to be better. And at the end of the day, you don't have to take it.
Right on. So do you have a formula for giving feedback?
Preparation, and I prepare it just like the clearing, like I said before. Here's the facts. Any feelings, I always tie in like goodr behaviors that it speaks to. The ask moving forward, and like, I need you to do this. So I've had to do this like for somebody. The first time, I'm not big on the, hey, you need to do this or this is going to happen. If I have to be there a second time for the same thing, then it's, all right, we've already been here. Now you do this by this date. And if you don't do it, it's X. And X might be you don't have a job here. X might be any number of things. And so that's the preparation. But then when I go into it, it's setting people up with putting people at ease, like, hey, we're here for this reason, letting people know ahead of time feedback's coming so you don't blindside people. I have been the asshole who has put ambiguous meetings on the agenda and hit somebody with critical feedback, and that's not fair. That is me hiding. So owning what it is, and then starting off with like, hey, at goodr, we value giving and receiving feedback. Both can be awkward. Get it. We'll get through this together. This is about giving feedback, though. It's not a conversation. I have X amount of things I want to talk to you about, and I keep it short, sweet, to the point.
That's a really great point you just brought up. The meeting invite. How do you invite someone to a meeting where you're going to give critical feedback? It would be so easy to, and I know this has happened one way or another, to do like a bait and switch. You invite someone to a pretty benign sounding meeting where it's like, oh, we're just going to talk about this thing. And then bam, hit the hammer of feedback. How have you shifted the way that you invite people to those meetings?
We have some systems already in goodr. After every event, we have just part of the process is just a feedback meeting. So creating those systems more and more so that you just have the table set to give feedback, and that for good and bad. So I think that's just really, really important. Also, for all the flock leaders, I have one-on-ones once a month. And so that table is set to kind of talk about anything. So that's something. But if it's out of the blue, I'll usually slide people like, hey, I want to give you some feedback about what happened. And here's the thing. If you fuck something up, you know it. And somebody hits you with that, they're like, you know it's coming. And it's just way better than this person have to walk in eggshells for the next 4 days. Like, all right, on Thursday, we're going to talk about this. And so I'll literally be like, feedback about X. And the purpose of this meeting is for SDL to give feedback about X so that we can move on and thrive.
Right. So that at the very least, they can steel themselves mentally for like, okay, this is what we're going to talk about.
I'm a big believer in systems and processes. I have a bunch set up in my own life for setting the table for these conversations so that you can't hide.
Right. Yeah, that's a key, keeping yourself accountable. One of the things that we experienced in the AMP process with our quarterly reviews was that at first, people were hearing a lot of critical feedback about their performance in that actual review. So we worked really hard to shift that so that people were hearing feedback throughout the quarter and there would be no surprises during that review. You've actually been a part of everybody's review for a while now. How has that shaped the way that you provide feedback?
Yeah, I mean, our quarterly reviews, we continually tweak them ongoing, and something that showed up about a year ago was realizing there's a self-evaluation and the self-evaluations were off. And what that is, that's a telltale sign that clear and consistent feedback was not happening the 3 months leading up to the review. I've also been the person who has blindsided people, hadn't given clear and consistent feedback to the review. So they got in there and people that are amazing workers and I'm close with. So understanding that, so people that I'm directly responsible for, and every company now has to have monthly check-in with flock leaders where the consistent feedback is happening. And so being able to see the shift where it went from self-evaluation being way off to, I think in April, there was 2 self-evaluations that were higher than the committee. And 2 out of everybody has 4 evaluations. So that's 2 out of 200. So that is quite insane. And what's amazing now is that we're getting better and better at this so that when I'm in there, I can actually give people really positive reinforcement and I don't have to be the bad guy.
Right. And that's an important part of any review. Like you said, remembering to balance out critical with positive feedback. I think the Gottman Institute, which does research on marriage, said it's something like a 5-to-1 ratio. So 5 positive for every 1 critical. And I know with all the systems we have at goodr, we're definitely approaching or way over that mark for positive versus negative.
For sure.
So if you think back over the course of your career, is there any feedback you've received that was really, really helpful to you?
Tons now. And what I realized in looking at this question was, oh man, I haven't worked for a lot of places where feedback was standard. Just yesterday, Nicole gave me some feedback on reading multipliers, but her feedback was, you need to ask way more questions in our leadership meetings and talk less. And so then we kind of put a little like system in place for that, but that just happened yesterday. That one comes to mind, but last year, actually, my friend Morris Miller, who is like a mentor of mine, I was out visiting him and we were talking about all these business things. He's an amazing, very like thoughtful entrepreneur. And we're talking about stuff and he goes, stop. You're a smart person. You can figure this out. The subcontext of that feedback was stop making fucking excuses. You can run the company. And I remember in the moment, I'm like, yeah, that's right. This is on me. And so it's good to get hit with that every once in a while.
For sure. Speaking of getting hit with stuff, you ready for the lightning round?
I am.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Why are you so anti-gossip?
It's a cancer.
Scale of 1 to 10, how well are we doing at avoiding it at this point?
Is 10 perfection?
Yeah, 10 is the best we could possibly. No gossip at all.
So, I don't know, probably a 7? Probably pretty good.
Yeah, that feels right. What do you think would have to change to get us to a 10?
More rigid accountability. I was just actually talking to Nicole also about this. I don't know, I don't have an answer, but more rigid accountability.
Okay. How many clearings do you think you've had by now?
I can't even guess. Seriously, I can't.
How do you typically prepare for a tough conversation?
Just like I stated before, the mapping it out clearing wise and putting a lot of thought into it.
Great. What's the one thing you always do to make sure a conversation goes well?
You never make sure, so there's always try, but assume positive intent. That's a really important thing going into anything in life, actually, but assume positive intent.
That's great. All right. Circle bar time. What's one thing you want to answer again or didn't get to bring up?
I think I'm good at it. How about you? Is there anything? I'll give this one to you if you have anything.
Nah, I feel like we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, cool.
Great. All right. So what's your advice for anyone who wants to follow a similar path?
So we're goodish at having conversations, right? We have a lot of room to improve. I think be mindful of how good you think you are because tough conversations are hard. And like really, really check your ego because unless you and your team, your friends, your lovers consistently have tough conversations without being hurt or getting in fights, there's a lot of room to grow. And so just think about that. The person who says, I'm great at having tough conversations probably is not. So I think so just if your answer is, I'm great at it, I would reevaluate that personally because I'm okay at it.
Right. Without practice, you're probably just blunt.
Yeah. Being blunt, that is actually circle bar time. My circle bar is being blunt and being an asshole is not being good at having tough conversations. That's being good at being blunt and being an asshole.
Right. Yeah, don't confuse those things. Cool. So how about next actions?
So download the clearing exercise worksheet from the show notes and start using it. Really start using it. Tell your team, tell your lover, your friend, like whoever you need to use this with, and I suggest you use it with everyone. Tell them about it so you are held yourself accountable. It's like when you tell people I'm going to run a marathon, so you're like, damn it, well now I have to do it. Tell people about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. And thanks everybody for listening. Be sure to join us next time. We're going to be covering the way we use GTD, or getting things done, and DEX to boost productivity. Until then, be excellent to each other.
Thank you so much for listening. Send us your questions, learn more, and find episode resources at goodr.com/culture. If you enjoyed yourself today, we would be so grateful if you could please leave us your star rating and review. That minute and a half of your time, it really does help people find us. And don't forget to share us on your stories, tell your friends, tell your parents, tell your dog, or maybe your dog isn't into this kind of thing, and that's fine too. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at culturegoodr and Stephen at Stephen Leese. That's Stephen with a PH because those V people are not trustworthy. Culture Goodr is produced by our in-house goodr team. The show is co-hosted and written by Shaun Tinney and Stephen Leese. Maya Morales does PR and promotion. Shelby Farrell handles all things digital. Emily Barber manages social. Teresa Garcia is our supervising editor, and the editor of this episode can be found on the blog. That sweet tune you're hearing right now was created by Mike Eddy of Cucumber Fuzz, recording by Barrett Bowman, and this voice you're listening to is Carrie Blunt. Many thanks to the entire team at goodr, really, without whom there obviously would be nothing to podcast about. At goodr, we exist to give you the permission to be unabashedly yourself, unless you're an asshole. So don't be. Until next time.